Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, motion from Mr. Jelenic. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Mr. Wilson. Any discussion of the minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes from April 26th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. Item 2, discussion and action items is the comprehensive plan. Do we have updates on the plan from the last time?
Yeah, so I mean, in your packet, there's a copy, we've uploaded the digital copy again of the comprehensive plan, and specifically is the kind of the update matrix there. And so, again, the intent of the matrix was to kind of be able to look through that and be able to choose the items that the Planning Commission thought might be of highest priority, and then be able to kind of work on those. So as you go through those, you'll notice some of the things are already accomplished. I was just asking Karen, I think what we can do is send out a Excel version of that so that if you so chose to, you could go in and move items around in there, or cut and paste, or highlight, or whatever you want. And then if there are things that you believe to be of higher priority, then maybe make a little list, and you could forward them to Ashley at her email, so that, again, we can start to massage that data and make an active chart that we're working on. And, or Karen, I don't know if you've got other ideas. I know you put thought into this. So.
No, I like the idea of going through this and definitely doing the priority numbering, lettering, whatever we want to do, just so that we have a way to tackle this beast, you know, because there's a lot on here. I mean, I've read through a lot of it, you know, but I'm just one person. Like I found one, like construct a bicycle and pedestrian path connecting North Park to the North Industrial Park and other points north, and we talked about that the other day, or a meeting or so ago, you know, possible grant. Working on that bike trail, you know, that would go behind the soccer field and whatnot with biking. So, I mean, there's things that are, you know, in some various stages, and certainly we've talked about them. So I like the idea of prioritizing all the different ones.
So I've got a sample of that up, and of course, again, I think it should click through in your packet fairly easily at this point. But again, what I'll do is make sure we get it to each member in Excel. Again, forward any comments. I mean, just even a brief review going. We've got those done, but this is the top 3. Even if you could pick the top 3 in your mind, that I think would be helpful. And then I think at next meeting, providing there's not more urgent matters, we could begin to have a discussion about if the top 3 match and what action we might be able to take.
Yeah, because I mean, there's quite a few different sections, color coded and whatnot. So, do you think? And do you want to go like through the green section first, and then maybe hit the orange section, leadership and cooperation strict?
I don't have a color copy, so no.
This, that's different. So this is in your note, in your minute, in your
In the packet.
yeah, in the packet.
Okay.
Yeah.
She emailed it out about 5. But that, so.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, well then,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
forget it.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and we've gotten copies of this like at the last meeting.
But we can make
That would
sure.
be in my car.
Yeah, and it's on the website too, and it's
Yeah.
permanently archived now on the website. So we can make sure that, Lisa, that you get, you know, one that's definitely more than black and white, and make sure that it's, again, in an Excel format that you can move around.
She was looking at the zoning draft.
Oh.
She was referring to on her.
Oh.
No,
So maybe if we all work on the section highlighted in green first before we move on to others, or what do you think it is?
Oh, that's
Or
a
anybody
fine
else.
idea with me. I mean, you could look at the green and say, yeah, we're gonna pick out the top few action possibilities in that, and then the next time we could look at the other color coded. So the green, let's see, is it economic development, branding, marketing, outdoor recreation? So it's more about marketing. The next color, blue, parks, grounds,
Yeah, I mean, there's some housing strategies in that green as well as transportation. So there's a few different topics in the green that might cover a few bases.
yeah, so that'd be great. We can just look at the green, and that way you don't feel like you have to
Yeah.
look at, 100
Yeah.
items on a
Yeah.
list. Look at the green, maybe pick out the top 3.
Okay.
We can bring back that poll, and again, time permitting, we'll have that be an action item on the
Okay.
agenda. Sound all right?
Sounds great.
I like that.
Okay,
Just to,
Yep.
Never mind.
no, go ahead.
no,
If you have something else, go ahead.
um, I think it might be covered better when Jason does his status updates.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on the comprehensive plan?
Are there parts of this plan that are done?
Yes,
Like if we were to, okay,
yes.
so then maybe also next time, could we like have it up, like, can we update a version of it to, or, I mean, I know we've got some that are,
Yeah, like this one's, I would call it, 80%, but that's just my own head. It's the website and all of that. I got halfway on this one, but maybe, Jason or Ashley could do a little better job. That's fine.
Yeah, we can go through and
see if there's
update
any
the-
that would mark off, or.
Yeah, yeah.
It seems like there's some on here that might,
Yeah. We're making progress. That's a good thing.
yeah.
Okay,
Anyway, sorry, that's all I have.
well, nothing, sorry. That's why we're here. Okay,
Okay, I'm not sorry, I take that back.
that's right. All right, all right, anything else on item 2? Okay, item 3, status updates and future agenda items. Item 3, draft zoning ordinance matrix. Mr. Jelenic has requested an explanation of these letters, Mr. Glassburn.
Yeah, we can start with that one, and then all of the items that are like, it says previously discussed, story field, RFP, wayfinding, signage,
Yeah.
all of that stuff we can start with the zoning first. So we just received this actually today. So this is as a result of the work that we're doing with basically the repeal and replace, review, repeal, and replace of our current zoning ordinance. So on this one, if you're wondering, okay, RA means residential ag. It's not a very common one for us in the city, but it's ET zone. So that's RA. The other ones you're probably familiar with. R12 means 1 or 2 family, 3 or 4 family residences. So R stands for residence, and then 1-2 means a single family or a multifamily. That's right on the first page. Okay, then R5 is 5 units and over. CG is commercial general. CDT is commercial downtown. IND is industrial. IP is industrial park. Okay, so I believe an example of the difference between industrial and industrial park is we have our North Industrial Park, right out by the fairground, and we have an industrial category where, for example, Schreiber and Foremost are
Yeah.
located.
Yeah.
Okay? MHP, come on, Jason, is,
Manufactured home park.
yes, thank you. Thank you, you got it.
Say it again.
Manufactured home park.
I had all these this
What?
earlier.
What is that? Oh, is that?
H is historic.
I'm sorry, what was that, Jason?
The H in the very far right is historic. F is floodplain. I'm sorry, guys, I should have wrote it on myself, I just got it.
I've got some acronyms I would use, but since Rod's here, I can't.
The GWP is the groundwater and wellhead protection, okay?
Groundwater and wellhead?
Yep.
Oh,
Should there be another letter in there?
What's a draft? It's a draft,
Oh,
okay,
sorry.
it's a draft.
I'm pretty sure these
HP.
are already, they're in like that, Jason, what's the one sheet that has the key on it, that has all the commercial downtown, there's a huge key in the corner, it has most of these, right?
Oh,
Like under-
The zoning list in the comprehensive plan has that in the land use map.
Yeah, I've never seen like that overlay district, though, are those in there, these ones you're trying to figure out?
The overlay districts are, they're probably not represented on the map, the zoning map, but they're an additional set of code that goes over, goes over your base codes, which are your basis districts. And you can overlay a zone on top of it. So we've actually had some conversation about an overlay. So like downtown, we've got an area, right, that are nice homes, that are, 2 and 3 story homes. And in that would be governed by R1, for example, or whatever is currently there. I think in some cases the city's got R2 or 3, multiple unit over it. But that's the base zone. And then you could create an overlay district that is like a historical preservation or a preservation of architectural style. So that's an example of how an overlay works. Well, it's R1, 2, or 3, but then we're going to create a zone that guides how people can build things back, or if something gets tore out, what gets replaced, so that, for example, you don't have 90% of the homes on the street being of a particular architectural design and very high value homes, and then all of a sudden in the middle of that, because the home got tore down, you allow a trailer park, or a trailer, for example, which we would never do, but that's the extreme. So that's what an overlay can do. So these overlays, again, groundwater protection. F is flood zoning. The S is, I already said it, I think.
No.
Shoreland, it's shoreland zoning. Okay, so F is flood, S is shoreland, and the H is historic. Right?
shoreline?
What's that?
What is shoreline?
Anytime that you're on the bank of like the Pine River,
Oh, okay.
I don't understand that zoning category very well, but Ashley, who worked as a county zoning administrator, gets it really clearly. So
Okay.
it is something that the DNR is, of course, concerned about with regard to land use next to water.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense.
Okay, so the P means that it's permitted. Okay, so if you look at antique gift or a gift shop, it's permitted in commercial general, it's permitted in commercial downtown, and it's permitted in the industrial categories. So P means permitted. That simply means they come in, they make a proposal, and they simply have to pull a zoning permit that says, our zoning administrator has looked at your proposed project, and it's that appliance store, or it's the antique or gift shop, and that fits within that zone, so go ahead. He issues a permit. Okay? As we go, so then you have all of these different uses. These are alphabetical. You'll notice that you'll find things in there that you'll say, well, what in the world is that doing in there? This chart really does a good job, if you just read down through it, of helping us realize where our zoning ordinance actually is currently. And you'll look at things and go, why are we talking about that? So for the first few pages, front and back, you have all the P, then you'll move into about the fourth page, full page back, you'll see at the bottom segment there's AU, that's accessory unit, which our current zoning is very limited on accessory dwellings. Sometimes you hear accessory uses. So, for example, if you have a smaller home on a lot, but you want to build the grandmother's suite or the parent suite in the backyard, we're very, very restrictive on that. And that's something that was identified in our comprehensive plan that we would want to look at and potentially change our zoning so that we could achieve a little bit higher density and we could allow people to use their property more freely. You still have to observe setbacks and things like that from the neighbor's lot and from other constructed buildings, but this would at least allow the Planning Commission, City Council to consider maybe we want to again allow property owners to use their land a bit more freely. Okay? That's AU. The C then is conditional use. Conditional uses have changed a lot in the past, I'm trying to think when the law changed, but it used to be that conditional use meant, well, if it was listed there, people would come through and they'd have to approach the Planning Commission and say, I'd like to do this, it's not listed, or it's listed under a conditional use. Do you think it would be okay there? And municipalities sometimes would use that as a way to say, yeah, no, it's just, we don't like that or want that. The law has changed now so that the conditional use law basically is looking to determine whether or not the use that's being proposed could be harmful to the other uses that are around it. So, for example, if it's an industrial park, you might say, well, it's okay to do cold storage in an industrial park, but if you're going to have somebody come in and manufacture pesticides next to the cold storage food location, that would be an example of what you might consider conditional use. It's like, oh, wait a minute, we've got a lot to consider here with regard to safety. Is it appropriate? What measures need to be in place to make sure that we have a planned park that makes sense and is offering the safest and best conditions for all of the occupants of the industrial park? Make sense? So that's an example of conditional. So you'll see the C's are all over in there. A lot of the C's in our review, conditional uses, are going to go away again because the law has changed and it's very specific. You have to be able to point to things and say, well, this could definitely be harmful. If you can't say it's not harmful, your base zoning ordinances better cover it. Because you can't come in and say, well, conditional use, we think we want a picket fence around that property. Well, why? Is there some safety factor that's really obvious? Because you have to, the municipality now, the zoning administrator has to prove that this is highly likely to be a safety concern for us to put the condition of having a fence around the use. Okay? So, another thing that you'll notice about this is as you go through, you'll probably see duplicates. So you'll see a duplicate in AU, but it's also covered under the P. So it's covered under permitted, it's also covered under the accessory use, and it's also covered under conditional use. And so in this process, we're going through to recognize that and saying, that's in 3 places, that's not even valid anymore as a conditional use. That should all be covered under the permitted category at this point. So we'll be combining, we'll be creating some new things, and it's most likely that this chart will reflect all of the different codes on the same page. So on this first page, it's all permitted use for example, again, looking at the second one down, antique or gift shop. It only has the P reflected there, right? Permitted. We think we're going to take it's probably best practice to take all the accessory use and the conditional use and list it all the way across under that antique or gift shop. So it might be permitted in commercial general, but in the industrial park, it might be conditional for some reason. Or it also could be in an R5 plus area that we had mapped out. You might say, well, we would like that to be an accessory use. So we'll make this chart so that for each zoning category that we have in the city, for that antique or gift shop, you'll be able to see exactly in one line where that's allowed, not allowed, whether it takes a permit, just a permit, whether it's conditional or accessory. All right? So I think that's, I don't know if you have questions on that. I would encourage you guys to read through it and look at it. This is condensed as we're going to get the review at this point. In other words, we're taking hundreds of pages of old ordinances and summarizing it into this format. So this is the easiest way to review what's there and to kind of say, geez, we have that in there? Oh, that should be gone, cross that out. Why is this a permitted use in that category? That type of thing, so.
I have a couple questions, just came right off the top here, and I'm sure it's gonna be in here, but swimming pools show up as a conditional use, but only in manufactured home parks. So as a residence, it doesn't show up in residential that you can have a swimming pool, but you can in a manufactured park.
So that's a great example, Mark, of we either missed it because it is listed in R1, R2, R3,
Okay,
or it's a major oversight in an ordinance that's old.
yeah, that only people in a trailer park can have pools and everybody else. Okay, just
Right.
stuff like that seems odd.
But that's perfect. That's exactly what we need the planning commission to do, is to look down through there like, that doesn't make sense. And we need people's perspectives to make sure that when we come to the final and we go to adopt, that things like that have been caught.
Okay, is there, and this could be in here for ordinances and maybe it doesn't have anything to do with it, but like, right now those storage units are very popular, people put on it. Is there a maximum number that somebody can have on their property in the city?
As a, so like a storage shed,
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that we'd have to look through. I don't know for sure. But back to your point, if that's not listed, we may want to say, like, you could literally say there's only one storage facility, storage shed on skids that's allowed, or two, or you can have as many as you want, as long as you have a safety setback that provides lawn and, that this one's not gonna catch on, that one on fire, there's all sorts of ways it can be looked at, but I don't know currently the number.
Okay, yeah, because there's a couple that, they almost seem to have more square footage in the storage shed on skids than the size of the home.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem, we would definitely want a regulation of.
Okay. And that could all be in here somewhere, but there's a lot to digest in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and like I said, this is the easiest form for people to digest it, because if not outside of this form, it's hundreds of pages.
Who did all this work?
This is being done by Beerbicker, who we
That's what I
contracted
thought,
to,
just
yeah,
making sure people knew, okay.
Beerbicker Engineering.
So you're saying they took hundreds of pages of information and then like pared it down into these tables?
Right,
That's what you're saying, okay.
right.
What is the red, or like, there's red print in,
Trying to look it up.
like on page, or sitting on a page, but the permitted accessory uses,
So,
or does that?
So some of the red are things that they've already looked at other codes, so they're looking at other ordinances, and they're saying, the red would either be something that they're likely suggesting as a potential, or they're saying, we don't know that should be in there. So it's just marking that text as a special spot for us to review, and I apologize because I haven't had time to read it myself, so, like I said, I just got this afternoon, so, yeah, it looks like clarifications to me, added definition in the couple that I'm looking at, but by the time we're done, we'll have dozens and dozens of those annotations or additions to these line items. As well as things that, again, we'll just cross off, so like, that's obvious now. I mean, we were in here earlier today and we found, vinegar distillery or something like that. Whoa. That was probably something, 60 years ago, but is it really something we need in our zoning ordinance at this point in time? Especially considering, things like the DNR and other agencies are looking in to say, well, you can't emit foul or odor to an extent that it irritates all the people. And you've got multiple levels of government looking at that now versus before, it was probably up to the local community,
Wasn't there something on how to regulate phone booths?
Yeah, I got one.
Remember that?
Yeah, there's phone booths in here, yep. Yeah.
From who knows when. Yeah, right, right.
Okay.
Mr. Perry, would you please explain what a phone booth is?
Library at the campus.
It's like a John Wilkes booth with wires.
Huh,
So is that okay on that one?
it's for me.
Any more questions?
So this is just the beginning of the review, essentially, or you were saying what you need from, so what do you need things from this committee in regard to this? Or just, like you said, us to review it, or?
Well, it's gonna be the planning commission's responsibility at the point to read this, make sure that you believe it aligns with where we want the city to go. I mean, there's gotta be public hearings, there's a big process that the planning commission is involved with.
Yeah.
So, part of that may be public input on the code that we go to adopt. But first, it's gotta make it through planning commission and staff. So, the good thing is we've got planning commission, and a lot of eyes that could look at this, but if your time is consumed, then it's gonna fall on staff, which means Ashley and I and Veerbeek are going to be reading a lot and amending it to what we think. So it would be great if the commission, who's gonna have to adopt this and put it forward to the council, would be reading it and understanding and asking questions where there isn't understanding.
So, like you said, I'll just reference, says any activity which emits smoke darker than shade number 3 on the Ringelmann chart. That's probably covered somewhere else, but under 401.04, there's a conditional use in industrial. Now, does that mean that's the only C listed there on that line? Does that mean it's like allowed then, possibly in commercial general?
It would be,
Or where it's, when there is no notification, no letter in any of the other boxes,
means that it is not allowed.
it's
And
not
C's
allowed.
conditional use.
Correct.
So it's gotta be granted by us.
Right,
Yeah.
So it's an option, it's a possibility.
in an industrial
Mhm.
setting, but in a commercial general, it's just not allowed
Correct.
at all.
Yep, if there's no letter saying that it's officially permitted, if the box is blank, it means that there is no consideration for that line item in that ordinance category.
Okay, so when I see that, then I should go over to permitted and look and see if that topic is listed there and see where it's permitted?
Correct.
Is that kind of like what we have to do here?
That's what we have to do at this point, which is why I was saying
Combining them together.
we're gonna end up, exactly.
So,
At some point, they will be conducted.
so we're gonna do right now.
No, we're not.
We'll be here with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go get a coffee.
Like, no one
Anyone
else.
else?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I recall when we were looking at an ordinance, there were more conditional uses listed than permitted.
Correct.
Is that typical, or are we trying to,
No, that's why I made the statement about the conditional use change that took place in it was probably state statute, where they took away a whole bunch of a municipality's ability to control through conditional use. They're saying, look, if you're gonna have it listed as a conditional use, it better be because there's something that you have a high level of concern that's provable, Like you can provide data that suggests that it could be a bad mixture of use, right? So back to the chemical versus food. Well, those are both industrial, but you may say our industrial park is just fine with anything that's not dealing with some type of toxic chemical. But if it is dealing with a toxic chemical, we have the right to very stringently review that to make sure that if that's allowed in there conditionally, that it is safe to all of the other industries that are around there. And you would have to prove that, they would have to prove that they are, and we would, if we didn't want them, we would have to prove that they're not. So they're gonna come with all of their things saying, well, this is how we process, it's approved by the EPA, the DNR has no concerns, these are our super filters, you know, all these different things, very technical to try to say, this is why you should issue it to us, and we're gonna have to have a very good reason to say, no, because you didn't cover this element or this element. And that's of concern, and we can validate it through, for example, other cases throughout the country. Something like that. I mean, I'm making stuff up to try to...
Sure. Yeah, okay.
Jason, where the non-conforming stuff, is that another document?
That's a good question. Yes, I don't believe that it's addressed here, so it probably, that's gonna be something that would be in the written portion of the code itself.
So that would stay the same, like, it's in chapter 400. So like that's still gonna be like a written thing, not a chart.
I believe that it's most, they might find a way to chart it, but from my experience looking at it, reading at it, I'm thinking that it's probably more likely to have to be in paragraph form.
So this chart is supposed to make it easy and quick to find what can and can't be done.
Correct. So a next level that's kind of cool, I think, is that you maybe, if you've looked at ordinances at all, some communities will have actually diagrams with lots showing minimum of this setback here and there and stuff like that. So we are pressing towards, I'm not going to promise that, but we're pressing towards that would be also a section in there. So if somebody goes to R1, says what's my setbacks, you'll flip to setbacks, you'll have an R1 section and it'll say, it'll have a little diagram, 20 feet front, 25 rear, 20-foot side, no less than 8. And it'll be right there in a little pictogram. So it makes it a lot easier than reading that down through a paragraph form, So it's going to be really nice when we're done.
Good work.
Yeah, absolutely, okay. So, anything else on that item before I'm getting to the status updates on previously addressed? Okay, previously addressed subjects, there are a few listed here, and it's just their examples, but Story Field, Jason, do you have anything you want to say on that one?
Yeah, so we had put an RFP out. The deadline for submittals is June 2nd. There was a deadline here at the end of May for submitting questions for clarification. We did not receive any questions for clarification. I have forwarded the RFP out to a couple of different developers. The Veerbecker, who is trying to help us get this RFP out there, has circulated it a lot of places. I've had a few a few calls with developers just kind of saying, well, what are you looking for? But at this point, I don't have any indication that there's a developer that is highly motivated to engage in the process. I mean, there's some tire kickers a little bit, but not anybody that's going to, we're going to come to you with something on June 2nd. So for that reason, we've already started some conversations based off of, well, actually, for example, a developer I talked to, I think it was late last week, and he said, well, would you consider changing from a duplex to a smaller single-family home in there?
We talked about this on Monday. How many square feet did he suggest? Was it 1,200?
He said, well, any more small is 1,500, but I think that we would be wanting to stay less than 15. I don't know what the number is, but yes, it would be a smaller square footage so that the homes could still look very nice, but that we would be coming in at a price point that isn't like a duplex investment, because a duplex condo, as you know, there's one for sale in town that's listed at $650,000. So if we can do something with the single-family home, we may be able to appeal to the same people. Mayor Todd, you had mentioned, keeping things zero-step entry.
Well, yeah, I mean, a couple points. The reason the one that's in town is for 650 is because he can't split them off. He's got to sell it as well.
Right.
That was a mistake on the builder's part, honestly. But it is a valid point. Yeah, correct. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we've started to have a little bit of that conversation there. I don't have a lot else to report.
So we had some calls from some local residents that happen to be retirement age, that are still in the house they raised the kids in, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, garage yard, that have asked about these. Hey, I might want to buy one of those. This was when we were talking about duplexes. The key to all of those folks is the zero step. That's why I keep pushing it, because they're all asking for that. And it makes sense, because a 20-year-old can live in it, a 90-year-old can live in it. Zero step, and then these folks are like, you know what, I'd really like a phone call when this stuff starts to get built, because I might want to buy one of those and then, of course, sell their house. And then you have a house for a family, potentially, 3 or 4 bedroom house in town that's already built. And that's why that's one of the reasons that building plan has appeal. And of course, the big challenge, or a big challenge, when you're building something new and then you're selling it, you of course have to sell it at an affordable price. So that's where that developer was talking. We own the land, which is a huge part of this. They don't have to go out and buy that, negotiate all that. And then they could build something if we basically gave them a price point. This is where these are gonna have to sell in this community, and they can see if they can hit that, and it's a yes or it's a no.
Yeah.
So the developer you were talking to that wanted to go from a duplex to a single family, what did he want to change the number of units to? From like the 8, what are we at, 8 now, 8 or 9 right now, to, did he want to go to, what number did he want to go to? Because if you're going to reduce the occupancy by half, are you increasing structures?
Right, so he said he thought that it might be possible in his experience to add a couple more units if you stayed with smaller single family, but he was just, it was very brief and he hadn't studied it. He said, well, I've got a business or another guy, developer that I talk with a lot, I'll talk to him about it. But yeah, he mentioned the number of units. I think like number of buildings may go up by 1 or 2, but then in the end you might have less actually dwelling units, because instead of in 16 you might only have in 7 buildings. So you'd have 14 in 7 buildings. You might only get 10 of a single family home because of setbacks and things like that, but we have to work on that.
Okay.
Mr. Kearns, did you have a comment on Storyville? Okay, just looked like you might, no problem.
My hand,
He
I
was-
was trying to,
He was
Karen.
winking me.
I
was
see.
doing this.
Oh, I see. Did you,
I'm
Karen,
doing
you
my
had-
best.
You missed
sorry.
it, and Mark jumped in, so I was over here.
Sorry.
So
my
I
head next
think I
time.
asked him if
Sorry.
you have a comment.
That's okay.
Did you have something here?
Yes, just a quick question. Has Verbacher given you any indication of how many inquiries, or how many?
People they've submitted
Yeah,
it
that
to,
they've submitted to?
I haven't asked them specifically, I just know that it's circulated through their network and they're in multiple communities. I'm sorry.
Okay, so follow up on that. Is it typical then for people to wait until June 1 so they?
No, I mean, honestly, I think we're battling what we have been battling for a long time, which is
Yeah.
there are a lot of communities that are smaller like ours that are being even more aggressive. So they're saying, we're putting in the streets and we're putting in the infrastructure and we're selling a lot. So I just talked to Southwest Regional Planning, again, they're doing that in Shullsburg, Benton.
So what Hillsborough did?
Hillsborough has done that. So a lot of these small communities are going, the only way we're going to be more attractive is if we make it easier. So I I mean, I feel that this is going that way. I'm holding out hope that we'll have a developer that'll come and say, yeah, I got 4 million and I think that's a great market. But I think the data suggests that we are a very tough market. And when you can go to the Dells or Spring Green or Viroqua even and put in something for more money because you're at a closer proximity to denser populations, the person living here that's a builder can drive to Viroqua and build. It only takes him 30 minutes. And he's got probably a stronger market because he's closer to more densely population, commuters. So that's what we're up against.
Anything else on Storyfield? Okay, anything at all? I mean, these were just suggestions kind of, but city lots, Jason, if we had, I know we have some for sale signs out.
Yep, got the city, the signs out per the suggestion. We've had several calls on them. The guy stopped in yesterday. He said, well, I'm interested in the lot, but I don't know if I can, if I can build in the timeline that you're expressing. We've been expressing that we'd like to see completion by 1.5 years. So in other words, and we've been expressing that there would be a performance guarantee required. So in other words, we would probably ask for something like $10,000. If they pull their permit, we'll pay them $1,500 back. If they get their basement in backfilled, we'll pay them, they'd have up to $5,000 back. Because you give them another $35,000 at that point. And then when they have the home with an occupancy permit within the 1.5 years, they get the last $5,000 back. So people seem to understand that and not be too concerned with it. But like the person I talked with on, well, I think that was just yesterday, he just didn't know if he had everything aligned and he's got a current house and da-da-da-da-da, So I think I probably talked to 4 or 5 different people now at this point that are at least asking and inquiring.
Yeah, I had a couple calls, but I sent them to you. So they're probably the same people, or if not, we can go over the list.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions, comments on the lots for sale? Okay, wait for, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Where do you have all the signs up? Which ones?
I put it on 460 West First Street and 291 North Jefferson.
And what about the Orange Street lot?
That's planning, that's RDA, and I haven't been able to conduct an RDA meeting. And
Okay, we're just gonna have to call a meeting for them. I'll just call them and tell them they're gonna have one, because we've got to address that.
yeah.
And we have to address it. It's gotta get marketed. But they do own it, so we do have to have their meeting. But it's time for one anyway. It's been for a
Reason
while.
to have one.
It needs to happen. Okay, wayfinding signs.
Wayfinding signs, go ahead, Karen.
So yeah, just a quick update on parking. So we're probably going to do a wayfinding sign in a couple of, probably 2 phases. So, goodness, Jody, geez, name could not come. I was looking at Jefferson, and I knew that wasn't her name. So, Jody and I were out and about looking at the city parking lots that we have. So we kind of made, I made these different pictures, and we're identifying phase 1 and phase 2. It's really kind of nice to, in the phase 1, just to let people know that these are public lots. So a fairly nice sign is what we're thinking of. But then in phase 2, these are in good locations to do like a kiosk to not only say this is parking, but also give other directions for, because these signs would be on the streets that the DOT doesn't have control over, we'll just say it that way. But then we can put things like restaurants, shopping, downtown, and do a little bit more marketing. Like, for one, you know, the parking lot across the street from Quick Trip, I mean, have a pretty good audience there that we could direct to our community, so. And we just did this the other day, so I just thought this would be a good time to let
Yeah.
you know that we were out doing it. We're doing stuff.
Yeah, so I think there's great progress being made. It's sometimes slower than we'd like, but that was a great project right there that Karen and Jody did, took pictures of the parking lots, looked at what signage current there. So that's a type of wayfinding signage, right, is parking. The other one that we've been talking more about is on Highway 14 or Highway 80, right? So the typical wayfinding sign where it says Richland Center, we have a few in town here. I think, what, was there a half dozen, Karen?
Yeah, there's 8.
There's 8 that are currently there that are all faded. So that normally says Richland Center and then says, you know, this way to whatever, downtown or the aquatic center or the park or this or that. So
Yep.
we have locations now for how many locations for those? You remember?
On 1480, in both directions, it would be 24.
So we're looking at 24. We have to submit those all to the DOT. The DOT has to specifically look at the location that you're proposing. We've got that documentation just about ready to go to them.
Yep.
I'm working on the paragraph form of the RFP, using some other RFPs that we've seen other communities go out with, and so we've just about got all the pieces to assemble into the RFP that we would then send to a sign maker and say, here's what we want, here's the numbers, this DOT approved, go. So Jody's been helping us with some of the graphic design. She's done a really nice job
Really nice.
being able to show, like, you know, this is a typical wayfinding sign, and this is how tall it is, and this is what it looks like when a person's under it, and you know, when a car is driving by it. So some reference. So that'll all be in the RFP. And of course, all that has to come back for approval.
Yeah. So the DOT says how big the sign has to be in a under 35 and over 35. So they have a say in that. So we'll follow their rules and regs. But the person that we're dealing with has been really, really good, very helpful from the DOT.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a plus. So I think, because these are geared primarily for visitors, tourists, I think we should have something before the snow flies. So that's
That'd be great.
what we're going for. So,
Okay.
so,
Anything else on the signs? Okay, zoning code modernization, I think do you have anything else on that?
No,
I
we're
don't
covered.
think so. Okay, one thing, Bruce Raisler, the hospital administrator, reached out to me 2 nights ago. We're gonna get to this in a second, because the next meeting would be June 28th. We're gonna need to not do that night, and the reason is that night, the hospital's gonna have a public hearing on their proposed new building. Bruce has not secured which facility or exactly what time yet, but it will be on the 28th. And I definitely need to be at that, and it would be great if a bunch of you were too, because this is a huge, huge project. In that evening, probably before we get done, or at least close. So I talked to Ashley about that, and when we get to the next meeting, maybe do that on Tuesday once, if that works. But I wanted to, we need to tie the hospital into this commission anyway, because obviously I can't imagine a project with a bigger impact on the future of the city, and the county for that matter. And I imagine, they're gonna wanna talk about annexation, infrastructure, all kinds of things as we continue forward. And I'm sure Bruce is gonna end up down here talking to this commission. I just don't know when yet. I'm sure he doesn't. But prepare for that. This is gonna be a minimum of a $100 million project to get it built. And they're working with architects and financial advisors and federal funding sources and all kinds of things. And the rest of this will all be explained at the public hearing for the hospital, which will be June 28th. And what Mr. Raisler said to me, he said, we are legally required to have a public hearing, but rather than just simply hold one to say we checked the box, we're going to do this right and bring a bunch of information and let the public be seen and heard. So I thought I'd mention that right now, if anybody wants to be there. And when Bruce lets me know the time and which venue, I'll certainly pass it along to everybody. So that's out there. You know, Jason and I and Ashley had several meetings on Monday on housing. I don't think we're ready yet to get any of those on planning going forward yet. Correct? I mean, like as a future agenda item?
No, I mean, we're still working on, right, the story and the other lots, so, yeah, there's no, I mean, there's been discussion about future land use, but nothing that is ready to be talked about there. Back to the hospital though, so we did have a meeting today. I think we probably started at 10 and got done at 12:30. We were on with 2 architects, 2 engineers, Bruce, the CFO of the hospital, and their project manager, and addressing a lot of the issues that the mayor just mentioned. I would say some of the things that are coming out of there that are most critical is for the city, especially for planning, is that we're definitely recognizing that with the development of that scale in that location, that we have to get much more progressive with regard to traffic studies and with regard to future development studies. So, for example, right now, when you talk to the DOT and you say, is it okay to use the driveway that's currently onto the Cole property across from Jelen? They look at it and say, yep, it should handle the hospital just fine. Okay, but they aren't answering the question from a future perspective, like, well, what happens when there's potentially another national chain that wants to locate next to the hospital, and now we've allowed the only Highway 14 access for on Jelen to go only to the hospital. Now what do you do?
Right.
Because you can't create more driveways. So it's pushing us into a place where Ashley will be coming forward, or the 2 of us will be coming forward requesting additional funds to be allocated for traffic studies and for future development studies.
Can we, just right there, right now, so your point is valid about what might be built in the future, which we're only speculating, but yes, and what the future needs will be on the Highway 14 corridor and potentially further east than people are thinking of now. Because remember, the hospital will be annexing onto the end of the city and extending the city to the east from where it is. So for example, now, if you are westbound on 14, you can't turn into the Homesteaders line. There's an island, and you can't do it. You have to come down to the light and whip around now. Well, that's not going to get any easier if they don't address this. That's why this, I think that's where this first came up, is because that business owner went, hey, wait a minute, if you're going to put that in, can you get them to cut that out of there and give me a turning? And they kind of said, probably not. And so we talked about all kinds of things, frontage roads maybe, and all these things, because it just seems obvious. If you put the hospital down there, as Jason said, somebody else is going to look and go, wow, flat land next to that, and that's where the traffic is. I'd like to be here. Well, right now we couldn't accommodate them. Or that we couldn't accommodate the traffic. There's no way to turn. Well, we can't leave it like that. You know, you just took the most buildable land we have and took it off the table. So this is going to be kind of complex.
No, it's complex.
It is. It is. This is not going to be a 10-minute conversation.
No.
And if I could just back up, so the reason we can't have another driveway on 14, just not allowed, or
It's
is
the
it
DOT's
because-
discretion based on traffic and how many there are now. I mean, they could grant it, but they could not. It's because it's a highway. So, and they just, you talked to them, or Ashley did recently. Well, you kind of just told us, they said it's okay for the hospital, but I think Jason's point is, are they seeing the big picture, or even considering more than just the hospital over the next 20 years. It doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, so my question is all right, so if the city boundary line was here and now we want to annex further and past that, could that in itself change the DOT's mind for additional driveways?
Yeah, that's exactly, and so that's why we basically, today I reviewed with an engineering firm, I said, I'm looking at studying, a half mile down the road further east, right? Where it would make sense on a section line, and considering the driveway accesses that had already been granted off of Highway 14, because I talked to the DOT yesterday, and Joe Rocks clearly said, the driveway accesses that are there is all that will ever be granted. Okay, now, that's with regard to driveway access. That doesn't mean that we can't plan and create a major intersection in lieu of a driveway, but we have to plan that. That's not them planning that. So if we say to them, well, there's a driveway here, we're getting rid of that driveway and rid of this driveway, and we're creating a frontage road entrance down here, and that is 2,000 feet from the next stoplight or likely location of a stoplight, they'll look at that and go, okay, that makes sense, but we're not gonna let you put in a stoplight on Highway 14 that's 500 feet away from the next stoplight. So, and we've already got some things, like if you think about it, we've got a controlled intersection there at Quick Trip and the Starlight, right? Because at one point it was thought, well, we might see development push across. Well, that's controlled. But perhaps an equally busy intersection is the one that's across from Pleasant Valley right there at, right? And that's the same one where we have U-turns taking place because there's only right in and right out with homesteaders and the heavy equipment. And so what happens if homesteaders changes use? That's not impossible for homesteaders to change use. What happens if the hospital says, well, we don't need 100% of that land, we're gonna create a sublot and we'd sell that, we'd sell a little section on it. It just, and what happens if across from Pleasant Valley, one of the landowners there decides, you know what, it is time to sell. And now we've got potential housing subdivision or whatever commercial type of development. You don't know, but that's the purpose of planning. You have to speculate some so that you don't find yourself 3 years from now going, oh my gosh, what a mess, and we will spend multi-millions of dollars then more to try to fix it.
Yeah, so we're gonna have a lot to talk about on this, and we need Bruce down here as soon as he's ready, and they've got a huge project. I'm not gonna share it, but they already know they have to amend the first plan that was drawn up, because it would have been over budget, because the USDA caps what they'll fund, and they're trying to use USDA funding. This is nowhere near, this is gonna be over the next 6 to 12 months, a lot of meetings and a lot of conversation, and a lot of big decisions. As I said, when's the last time Richland Center had a project of this scope, $100 million? I don't know that it ever has. And then, what about the hospital's existing property? Which is another conversation that we're going to be involved in at some point. Right? Okay, so that's out there.
How far along is the hospital, this project?
Well, right now, what they've done, they bought the land, and they brought in a financial advisor, and brought in architects, and they've been getting drawings and all of that. But until they know that they have the funding secured to build it, it's a lot of great ideas that they're working on, but they gotta know they have the funding. And they chose USDA because it's a very, very low interest, long-term payback option. It makes it affordable to build and pay it back. I know, and just so everybody knows, if you don't, every politician that I can name that represents this area at the state and federal level is in favor of this. And all of them are working behind the scenes to help find money, all of this. That's Tammy Baldwin, that's Tony Evers, that's Tony Kurtz, that's Mr. Van Orden, all of them are trying to help this happen. And it's the first truly bipartisan project I think I've seen in my time here. Because they're all on it. trying to help behind the scenes and publicly. You know, the city's involved in that. The hospital came to us right away, maybe my first 2 or 3 weeks as mayor in 2020. Hey, someday, and when we do that, could the city help us put in infrastructure? Well, it's not like we have $3 million over there on the table, but we did apply for a federal appropriation, federal funding to do that. There's several rounds of, it could get eliminated here or there, but it's made it through the first round. And that's Senator Baldwin's staff doing that. And we'll see, it'll probably be, it could be close to the first of the year before we know for sure on that. I mean, that's in the next federal budget. In the meantime, though, the hospital's working on USDA funding. I don't remember for sure the timeline, but it's sooner than that. And if you get turned down, you can apply again, but then you're 12 months out. You can do it once a year, try to get the money. So that's how far they've gotten at this point. And then the rest of this, that's kind of to your question, that's what the public hearing will be about. That by then, it'll be another 5 weeks from now. And they should have more information. I'm sure the reason for the public hearing is they're going to expect a lot of questions, which there should be. Okay. Okay, besides the hospital, Jason, you don't want to get into housing yet as a future agenda item on any of the specific?
No, I can talk, I mean, I guess I'm not reading it, but if you allow me to comment, I can comment without getting into closed session types of things.
That's what I'm getting at.
Okay. So, I'm trying to think if there was anything more though. I think that's good on, yeah, just a lot of moving parts on the hospital. Okay, so other things that we had with regard to an update on Panorama, we did have a meeting with Ellers and Dwayne Kleinsasser on the 22nd, so that was Monday.
On Monday, you and I and Ashley.
Yeah. And that conversation went pretty well. That was with Ellers providing the data that they've had for some time, with the analysis that they performed with the developer's money, right? So that conversation went okay, and basically Mr. Kleinsasser went away saying, yep, okay, got it, I need to review this and talk to, again, different fund sources. So we've set another meeting for 6/1, for June 1st on that, and we'll just see what Mr. Kleinsasser has been able to identify as a funding source. So that's where we are with that. We had commented some, and quite a bit, had a good discussion on housing in closed session in regard to some potential multifamily development. We continue to have consistent meetings on that topic, and things continue to move in a positive direction. And I would expect that over the next 2 weeks that we will have some preliminary numbers that will be worthy of presentation, and it will be primarily about city finance, like what level do we think that the city may have to participate at. So I don't know that it will come here, since it's so, that element of it is so much like, does the city have funds, what do we do, how do we come up with the money? So it may happen there first and then come back to planning with regard to what the development would look like. There will be a substantial amount of work that we have to do with planning, because what we're looking at would require some changes in zoning, future land use maps, things like that. So it will be extensive, but kind of the first stages, rather than getting too down in the details of like, do we actually need to change all this yet, is to actually figure out if it's financially viable. So that's where we are on that. We, I think, covered the municipal lots. I think that's probably as far as we need to go on the housing.
Yeah, one question I have if you can remember off the top of your head, because I don't, is how Jefferson Elementary is currently zoned?
I think that's sitting in an R1.
Okay, hypothetically, if somebody wanted to convert that into apartments, is that gonna have to be rezoned?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so that's, I'm getting the cart in front of the horse, but it's what we would call an educated guess. I would expect that to get here too. That's, might not happen, but it sure might. So be ready for that too. Okay, anything else for future agenda items? Okay, is it okay with you guys if we meet on Tuesday, the 27th of June at 5:30? Can you do that?
I cannot.
Okay. If we meet Thursday, the 29th, I have to ask the general manager of Attestant Power Sports if I could leave work early.
Do we want to schedule our meeting after the hospital?
Well, I mean, that's fine,
Or
but
just
then
not do that?
we could sure do that if we do. I mean, we could,
Could we move it to the 21st?
well, we could do that, but she just asked a great question. There's gonna be this public hearing on the hospital. Do you guys wanna meet on the 29th? And if you do, is it okay if you meet at 6:30? Because I work somewhere that closes at 6 on Thursdays.
Or, okay, well, we could meet on, well, either way, I can't, I gotta coach my kid's baseball team. But why don't you, I know, we're a tough squad. So, but if the hospital meets the night before, the night we're supposed to meet, couldn't you go to the next week to actually give you time to
We sure
digest?
could do
To
that.
digest what we actually heard as
Well-
opposed to,
If you go the next week, you're running into the 4th of July.
what is the 5th?
I'll go, well,
I
okay.
don't know how hungover you get on the 4th, but,
I mean, I could be here. I could be here,
Yeah.
but I don't know how many of you take vacation time or whatever. Can you think we could hit a quorum on the 5th of July?
I can do the 5th, but don't worry about the week before, I know I can't make it the week before.
Well,
So,
can you make the
I
5th
could
of
make it
July?
the week before, or,
no, I don't mean the week before, I meant the Tuesday, Thursday, the week of our normal meeting, sorry.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
that-
Would
that's
you
also
guys, would you guys rather meet on Tuesday, the 27th, or meet on the 5th of July? I don't care. I could do either. Will you be around, Mr. Cairns, on the 5th?
Either of those dates I'll be around.
What about the 29th?
Okay, and when are you not available?
Tuesdays, Thursdays during June,
So you could do the 5th?
I can do the 5th.
He's out either way. Ray?
Oh, I can do it, any of them dates.
I can do either.
I can do the 5th.
5th? July
Yeah.
5th?
Maybe. I got plans with my son, so I will see. He, sorry, will take precedence.
Well, I, 1, 2,
You
3.
can also do, what is the meeting, Zoom, what do we use?
Oh, on the
WebEx.
phone?
We could do WebEx.
I can call him.
I mean, because I would just say skip it to the end of July, except I don't think we should do that because we're going to have the hospital public hearing. I think we should do the meeting. Okay, so July 5th at 5:30, because we've got 5 people who said they could be there and we can make it available with WebEx. I think we'd hit a quorum. July 5th at 5:30, is that all right?
Perfect.
That's what we're going to do. Okay? For the
July 5th?
at 5:30. Okay, the next item on the agenda is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Ms. Miller has moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Jelenic. All in favor of adjourning tonight's meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Tonight's meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.